In today's world rife with temptations and entertainment, a legitimate question arises. Are we truly free? Before rushing to an answer, consider how a typical day begins. Awakening often isn't marked by a drive for new achievements, but an automatic reach for the phone to dive into an endless stream of information and entertainment. Social media feeds, news headlines, short videos, all become a way to escape reality, fill a void, and distract from pressing matters. Then comes the morning coffee, which becomes not just a way to perk up, but a kind of dopamine fix, triggering pleasant sensations. On the way to work or school, we continue to consume content, podcasts, music, social media notifications. This constant flow of stimuli leaves us no peace, filling every free second. Finally, the long-awaited silence arrives. But instead of relief and peace, we feel discomfort, emptiness, and unexplainable anxiety. This state forces us to seek entertainment again, new sources of instant gratification to fill the void. We shouldn't blame ourselves for seeking pleasure. It's a natural human need, an evolutionary mechanism that drives us to seek what brings satisfaction and sustains life. But a question arises. What happens when the pursuit of pleasure becomes an addiction? When the need to constantly feel good becomes a prison, depriving us of the freedom of choice and the ability to experience the full spectrum of emotions? Are we becoming prisoners of an endless cycle of instant gratification, losing the ability to enjoy simple things and find meaning in life? The answer to this question is something each person must find for themselves. But first, we must recognize the problem and consider what truly makes us happy. Almost a century ago, the visionary Aldous Huxley presented a dystopia that is perhaps even more terrifying than George Orwell's grim prophecies about totalitarian regimes in his famous novel 1984. While Orwell warned of a future where freedom would be suppressed by brute force, Huxley painted a picture of a society where people would be enslaved by hedonism, where their minds would be so saturated with entertainment and pleasant stimuli that the very thought of resistance would become unthinkable. In this world, slavery needs no chains or jailers, for people will genuinely love their subservient position. Take a look at the modern world. What do you see? A society consumed by an insatiable thirst for entertainment, where the consumption of pleasures has reached unprecedented levels, and the pursuit of instant relief from the slightest discomfort has become the norm. But at what cost does this pursuit of fleeting happiness come? Does this endless pursuit of pleasure truly grant freedom, or does it subtly weave a web of addiction, turning people into willing prisoners of their own passions? In this analysis, we will delve into an exploration of how modern society, like a skilled trainer, teaches us to seek pleasure. Using this desire as a sophisticated tool of control, we will examine how this addiction to instant gratification can transform a personality, turning it into something far from the ideals of freedom and independence, a submissive slave unaware of their own condition. If you are confident that your mind is under your complete control, then it may be worth continuing this exploration, for you may encounter unexpected discoveries about the nature of your own freedom. Modern slavery needs no shackles or cruelty. It achieves its goals in a more sophisticated way, through all-consuming pleasure. When the pursuit of pleasure becomes the main goal, slavery cleverly disguises itself as freedom. This is the scenario Aldous Huxley envisioned in his prophetic novel, Brave New World. Imagine a society where doubt and critical thinking are suppressed by a constant stream of entertainment. The search for meaning in life gives way to the unbridled consumption of cheap pleasures, which are imposed as the norm. In this dystopia, people are programmed from birth to avoid any manifestation of discomfort. When negative emotions, anxiety, or existential questions arise, soma is always at hand, the perfect drug, immersing everyone in a state of blissful anesthesia and submission. But is this world merely a figment of the imagination? Pay attention to your daily life. What is your first reaction when you feel bored, sad, or disappointed? Do you stop to analyze your feelings? Or do you immediately look for a way to distract yourself? Social media, TV series, delicious food, alcohol, shopping, sex, pornography, video games. The list goes on and on. We live in an age of instant gratification, where any discomfort can be suppressed in seconds with a simple touch of the screen. There's no need to face emptiness. It's enough to fill it with another dose of pleasure. The most dangerous thing in this situation is the illusion of choice. No one forces you to consume entertainment around the clock. No one compels you to spend hours on Instagram or TikTok. No one threatens you with a weapon, demanding that you buy a specific product, eat a specific dish, or continue scrolling endlessly. But if it really is a choice, then why is it so hard to stop? The answer lies in deeply ingrained conditioning. Addiction to instant pleasures as a way to escape any discomfort is firmly established in the mind, turning into a habitual algorithm of actions. Gradually, the individual loses the ability to withstand the burden of boredom, silence, and immersion in their own thoughts. The mind, deprived of the opportunity to be alone with itself, becomes a hostage to Huxley's prediction, a happy slave whose prison is built not on coercion but on pleasures. What is the reason for such a transformation? How do conditioned reflexes push us to flee from critical thinking, keeping us in a vicious cycle of addiction? These questions will be the subject of further analysis. Has the question ever arisen, why is it so difficult to stop? Why, even realizing the need to focus on useful things, does the hand involuntarily reach for the smartphone, and the brain crave a new portion of notifications, videos, and stimulation? This is not an accident, but the result of targeted training. From the first days of life, a person is taught to avoid discomfort at any cost. The educational system is aimed not at developing critical thinking, but at the mechanical reproduction of information. The labor market programs for production, not reflection. The entertainment industry offers an endless stream of distractions, not allowing us to stop and think about the world around us. As a result, a society is formed where the main danger lies not in an authoritarian regime that suppresses freedom of speech, but in a system that deprives us of any desire to seek this freedom. Aldous Huxley, a perceptive thinker, understood the danger of invisible enslavement like no other. In his dystopia, Brave New World, citizens were not subjected to gross violence and suppression. Instead, from an early age, they were taught to adore their own slavery. With the help of hypnopedia, the suggestion of thoughts through repeated messages in sleep, their beliefs were formed, bypassing conscious understanding. Key phrases such as, "everyone belongs to everyone else," and "a gram is better than a dam," were deeply rooted in their minds, eradicating any need for doubt. They were raised in the belief that happiness lies in conformity, avoiding deep reflection, and fleeing from any suffering. Today's realities reflect this dystopia, but in a new form. Modern conditioning does not occur through hypnopedia, but through the all-pervasive algorithms of social networks, sophisticated corporate marketing strategies, and a continuous flow of stimuli that subtly shape people's behavior. Each notification that appears on the screen causes a release of dopamine in the brain, causing addiction. Short videos, easily digestible and not requiring mental effort, teach passive consumption of information, the reward for conformity. Likes, approval on social networks, instant pleasures, reinforces the belief in the correctness of this path. As a result, a generation is formed that is unable to remain alone with its thoughts, cope with discomfort, and question established systems, as the skill of critical thinking atrophies. Dictatorship becomes unnecessary when the masses voluntarily reject any ideas that require mental effort. However, the rejection of critical thinking comes at a price. The desire to avoid discomfort at any cost makes people more fragile, vulnerable, and susceptible to manipulation. The constant pursuit of pleasure weakens the will, and artificial happiness turns us into passive beings. But how does this transformation happen? How can the promise of a world without pain lead to complete submission? This question requires further consideration. Imagine a utopian picture where suffering is banished, where pain is instantly healed, and sadness, disappointment, and anxiety have disappeared. At first glance, this seems like an idyllic paradise, but let's look deeper. What happens to an individual shielded from life's trials? What happens to a society aimed at avoiding the slightest discomfort? The answer is obvious. It weakens. Aldous Huxley foresaw this dangerous trap with frightening insight. In his dystopia, Brave New World, happiness was ensured by the continuous consumption of soma, the perfect drug. No negative consequences, no risks, only instant satisfaction. But what is the true cost of such happiness? It lies in the fact that no one knows how to cope with pain, disappointment, or even their own inner world. Any unpleasant thought instantly dissolves in chemical euphoria. Life turns into an endless series of superficial pleasures. Sex, entertainment, consumption, and anything that falls outside this scheme is perceived as a threat. Look around. In the modern world, there may not be soma as such, but its analogs exist. Modern social networks, like a drug, deliver instant doses of approval, and dating apps erase the very fear of possible rejection. Skillful algorithms anticipate desires, offering exactly what is needed, even before a person realizes it. It seems that everything is created to eradicate the slightest discomfort, any uncertainty, any need for effort. However, this endless pursuit of avoiding pain has its price, and that price is psychological resilience. The harsh truth of life is that pain carries an important function. It is suffering that tempers character and forms an inner core. Disappointments encourage personal growth, and difficulties stimulate development. But when everything around becomes soft and comfortable, when any challenges are avoided, a person becomes increasingly vulnerable and fragile. Today, even minor discomfort seems like an unbearable burden. Small setbacks turn into existential crises, and the slightest conflicts are perceived as real disasters. Anything that requires patience or effort is ruthlessly discarded, as people have been taught to seek the easiest path, instant gratification, and quick solutions. And it is this that makes them more manageable. A society of strong and resilient individuals who accept discomfort and learn from it will never become a docile herd. It will never agree to live in a system that restricts freedom. But a society of emotionally dependent people, in need of constant stimuli to avoid inner emptiness, fleeing from any manifestation of suffering, is a different matter entirely. Such a society will be obedient, easily manipulated, and will become an ideal environment for those who seek power without resorting to open force. This is how the trap closes. What initially seems like freedom, the ability to avoid any suffering, ultimately turns into a real prison. There is a way out of the vicious circle, and the key to it is realizing the fundamental difference between fleeting pleasure and a higher purpose. Pleasure, like a drug, enslaves the will, while purpose grants true freedom. What does a person seek the meaning of their existence in? Fleeting happiness or achieving a meaningful goal? The answer may seem obvious, but how many people seriously think about it? Modern society persistently instills that happiness is the ultimate goal, but what does it offer in return? An endless series of fleeting pleasures that do not bring true satisfaction. Likes on social networks, spontaneous purchases, casual sexual encounters, binge-watching TV series, food laced with flavor enhancers. All this only temporarily pleases the senses, leaving a gaping emptiness in the soul. This is the root of the problem. Pleasure is always fleeting. It requires constant renewal. Otherwise, that same oppressive feeling of dissatisfaction returns. It is worth remembering the most important moments of life, those that shaped personality. Were these moments of fleeting joy or periods of trials requiring effort and overcoming oneself? Viktor Frankl, a renowned psychiatrist who experienced the horrors of the Holocaust, wrote in his book, Man's Search for Meaning, that a person cannot exist without a purpose. He noted that even in the most inhuman conditions, those who found a higher meaning in life survived and maintained their sanity. This is the paradox. The pursuit of continuous pleasure weakens, while the pursuit of a high goal strengthens the spirit. Pleasure is easy, accessible, and addictive. Purpose, on the other hand, requires effort, discipline, and resilience. But, unlike pleasure, purpose does not disappear as soon as the fleeting effect passes. It forms an inner core, gives an incentive to move forward. However, modern society is not interested in a person seeking a purpose. Purpose requires time, self-analysis, effort, and a willingness to overcome difficulties, which contradicts the logic of instant consumption. A person who has found a purpose in life does not need constant entertainment, filling every second of their time with superficial pleasures. They are difficult to manipulate by promising instant happiness. That is why a person is constantly bombarded with stimuli that distract them from the search for true meaning. A person with a purpose poses a danger to a system that thrives on emotional dependence. If something is missing in life, perhaps the answer lies not in increasing the amount of pleasure, but in reducing it. Perhaps the path lies not in seeking new amusements, but in shedding the excess of them. One should ask, what truly drives a person? What makes them wake up in the morning? Do they live for fleeting pleasures, or are they building something truly meaningful? So, how does one break free from the clutches of the relentless pursuit of pleasure and reclaim their freedom of mind? How does one break the vicious cycle and regain control over their own thoughts and actions? These are the questions we will explore further. Now that it is clear how an insatiable thirst for pleasure can turn a person into a prisoner, a key question arises: how to break free from this trap? How to regain control over the mind in a world that seems to be constantly striving to distract, intoxicate, and make one emotionally dependent. First of all, it is necessary to realize that the struggle will not be easy. The modern system is designed to make a person fail. It pushes one to seek fleeting pleasures, to continuously feed algorithms with their attention, to endless consumption. However, there is a way out, and it begins with recognizing the game being played against us. The first strategy for breaking out of this vicious circle is strategic deprivation of pleasures. This does not mean becoming an ascetic and giving up all the joys of life. Rather, it is about learning to consciously regulate the impact of addictive stimuli. The problem is not pleasure itself, but that it is used as a tool of control. When a person deprives themselves of certain pleasures for a period of time, such as social media, heavily processed foods, or endless consumption of entertainment content, something amazing happens. The brain begins to rewire itself. It relearns to find satisfaction in simple things, and the irresistible craving for artificial stimuli gradually loses its power. The second step is restoring tolerance to discomfort. If a person seeks to regain autonomy, they need to relearn to cope with boredom, disappointment, and the absence of constant stimulation. This means allowing oneself to be in silence, disconnecting from the information flow, and simply existing without trying to fill every minute with some distraction. At first, this may not be easy. The brain, accustomed to constant dopamine rushes, will demand more. However, if a person can resist this, they will begin to notice something important. Discomfort does not kill, but on the contrary, makes one stronger. The third step is developing critical thinking. It is necessary to ask oneself questions. Why do I feel the need to constantly distract myself? Who benefits from my addiction to pleasures? What could I be doing if I were not trapped in this cycle of instant gratification? The more questions a person asks, the more they realize that most of their habits and desires were not actually chosen by them. They were programmed by the system. However, only those who ask themselves these questions can begin to rewrite their own destiny. The fourth and perhaps most important step is replacing pleasure with purpose. As mentioned earlier, the search for meaning is the real antidote to the slavery of immediate pleasure. Therefore, it is necessary to ask oneself, what is really important to me? What do I want to build? How can I make my life more meaningful? These are not easy questions, but they are the only ones that truly matter. However, even if an individual attempts to break free from the vicious cycle of hedonism, the surrounding society, as a rule, remains deeply immersed in it. Inevitably, when a person decides to change, their perception in the eyes of others undergoes a transformation. Some will be in awe, while others may turn away, as liberation from accepted norms becomes a kind of mirror, reflecting what many prefer not to notice in themselves. If the reader has reached this point, They probably already have an understanding that the relentless pursuit of pleasure is not true freedom, but rather a form of conditioning that keeps one captive. Modern society does not need physical shackles for control. It is enough to convince a person to avoid any discomfort. Realizing this trap raises an important question: what to do with this knowledge? Breaking out of the system requires not only willpower, but also a willingness to swim against the current, to refuse easy paths, and to accept the fact that true freedom is often associated with loneliness and resistance. When constant distraction ceases, clarity of vision appears, and then it becomes obvious that many around are still unaware. Some will admire this, others will reject it, and still others will feel discomfort because of the changes that have taken place. Liberation becomes a threat to their illusions, and they may try to pull a person back, convincing them that there are no problems in the existing system, claiming that life is meant for carefree enjoyment. However, now the truth is known, pleasure without purpose is just another form of slavery. The choice remains with each individual: to continue the former existence, distracting themselves and seeking the next dopamine fix, ignoring the growing feeling of inner emptiness, or to regain control of their mind, define a purpose, and become a person who is not easily manipulated. The author raises questions about free will and manipulation in modern society. He urges viewers to consider whether they feel trapped in routine and imposed desires. It is emphasized that society often uses the pursuit of pleasure as a tool of control, subtly guiding people along a certain path. Instead of blindly accepting reality, the author suggests questioning generally accepted norms and considering the hidden motives behind what is happening. Doubt, in his opinion, is the first step towards liberation from mental shackles. In conclusion, the author asks viewers to share their thoughts in the comments and encourages them to join a community of thinking people striving to understand deeper truths. He also asks to support the channel with a like and subscription if the presented information has made them look at the world from a different angle. The channel is positioned as a platform for those who do not want to go with the flow, but strive for critical thinking and the search for truth.